What up, what up, what up? Hope everybody's having a great start to their week. And welcome to another dressing room conversation. So I got a question for you. Are you really looking to develop your style this year? If you are, then this conversation today, again, conversation, not a lecture. So if you have any insights, by all means, put them in the chat. Um, this conversation is going to be for you because this conversation will help you to cultivate your own style. And the great thing about this is it's not going to cost you a lot of money. It will cost you some intention and it will cost you some time in order to do that, in order to do this. But it's been beneficial for hundreds of guys that I've worked with. And so I wanted to pass this on to you. So there are three components. If you know me, you've been rocking with me for a little while. You know that we're always talking about consciousness. We're talking about construction and ultimately communication of your look to tell the story, to make a statement in style. And so when I'm talking to a lot of guys, what I've noticed is that they are lacking in these three spaces. And there are three things that I would think every guy really should know about their personal style, but it's very easy to overlook it if you aren't aware of it. But once I make you aware of this, you're gonna be like, oh, yeah, I should have been paying attention to this. So the first thing that I want you to think about is your image. Now I know you're probably saying, Michael, yeah, if I'm in the style, of course I'm thinking about my image. But I want you to think about your image in this way. I want you to think about your size. I want you to think about your scale, and I also want you to think about your silhouette. And this is a video that I'm going to be launching this week where I'm talking about understanding elements of your physique, your body, so that you can ultimately start getting the right clothing for yourself. And the first thing that a lot of guys don't think about is their scale. They don't think about how their body is shaped. Pause. Pause. Right? So they're not thinking about what type of proportions that they have. Now, guys who see me a lot of times are surprised, and I've noticed that this is a new thing for a lot of content creators. People will see them out and be like, "Man, I didn't know you were that tall. Or I didn't know you were that swole. Or I didn't know you were that your shoulders were that broad, or any of those things," because they may, only record from the neck up. And fellas, you've probably dealt with a few of these looks too, where the girl shoots her photo from up here, not here, or never gives you any full frame photos. It's not to say that you can't be beautiful and big, but they can work these angles differently than we can. So we have a understanding of the importance of understanding your scale. So if you're short torso, a lot of guys like me, a lot of people will see me out and be like, "Damn man, you tall." And it's because I have a short torso. So when I'm sitting, it doesn't look like I'm that tall because all of my height is in my legs. And so understanding that started to help me pay attention to what it was that I was purchasing. Over the last decade, we'll say everybody's been buying the much more shrunken look, right? The shorter jackets, the shorter pants. And for a time I was doing that as well, probably up until about 3 or 4 years ago when I started to realize that was really uncomfortable for me. And when I started turning to the side, I started realizing that my jacket looked short. And so some of my favorite jackets I stopped wearing because I was much more self aware. Wasn't self conscious, but was just much more self aware. And so that changed the dynamic for what I was presenting when I was stepping out. And I did notice that there was an elevation in how people experienced me because I wasn't so trendy. I didn't look bad, but I looked off from what I wanted to represent and what I wanted to present to the world. So you want to pay attention to your scale. If you're a guy who has a long torso and short legs, then you want to pay attention to the types of jackets that you're getting. You want to get something that's going to be slightly shorter and start to cut off your midsection so that you don't look so long. And then to pair that with some higher waisted trousers that are going to give you a longer leg line, right? So there's the understanding the scale there that will help you elevate your style without you even having to spend any money, at least initially, right? At least initially. So the next component of that is going to be understanding. Sorry, guys, we just double checking something. Is going to be you understanding your is going to be you understanding your size, right? And so understanding your size is not just small, medium, and large, right? It's not just you saying, "Oh, I'm a 40." Because what happens for me with a lot of clients that I've worked with, they will come in and they'll say, "Oh, I'm a 40," and we take their chest measurements and they are actually a 41 or a 42, and they're like, "Well, I've always bought 40s from this particular brand," and they forget that guys also experience vanity sizing just like the women do, and so if they're going to Brooks Brothers, yeah, they're probably wearing a 40 because that 40 is cut like a 42, maybe even a 43, and they're feeling good because they have to have their stuff, tailored and shaped. But then when I put them in a European brand, they feel constricted. And so when we go up a size, it actually fits them because, again, of vanity sizing. It's also important to remember when you are having European or Asian pieces made that they're going to be done in centimeters, not in inches. And so a centimeter is going to be slightly smaller than a inch. And so when we're looking at centimeters, a 50 is going to equate to like a 41 when you're wearing a jacket that's European. So just for your own awareness. But when we start thinking about those things, then we start saying, okay, I not only need to know my size, but I need to know the size of different parts of my body. So when we're often taking measurements, even if we're doing ready to wear, but especially when we're doing custom, we take overarm measurements, we take chest measurements, we take your upper abdomen measurements, we take your waist measurement, and then we take your hip measurement. And if I'm really needing to be intentional, I'll take a thigh and a calf measurement because those sizes may change the way that a garment needs to be fit for you. So there are plenty of guys that I know that are broad shouldered, broad chested, but have no seat, right? They forgot leg day. Or some other guys who have a pronounced seat, but still may be slim up top. It's not the best look for a fella, but like, listen, you got to deal with what you got, right? And so they have different concerns that they have to navigate through. But once they understand these different sizes, they start to immediately become aware of why certain jeans fit while other jeans didn't fit, why they could wear certain jackets in one company, but other jackets were just ridiculously uncomfortable, and how they need to maneuver in order to have a different type of silhouette or a different type of look that they're putting together. They realize that they don't have to feel bad for going up a size on a particular style or brand because they understand their size and they understand their measurements. So the next thing that you have to think about there is we talked about your scale, we talked about your size. Now we have to talk about your silhouette. And I was doing some research for an upcoming video that I'm going to be doing, and an interesting dynamic or concept came up about silhouette. I forget what the gentleman's name was, so please forgive me. But he was talking about how size or silhouette is your shadow, right? It's the thing that is going to precede you even before somebody sees the clothing that you're wearing, the brand, or the scale or your size, right? The size is going to be outlined, but they won't have a real understanding of what it is that you're wearing. And it's interesting because I started to think about like different superheroes, right? And I especially thought about Batman. So when Batman gets the bat signal, he may, especially in movies, you may see him standing on a cliff or something, and there's the silhouette of this masked figure. And seeing the points, seeing the cape wave was different than when we would see the silhouette of Spider-Man, right? Who may be shooting the web all throughout the city and then land on top of the building, and then we see his silhouette, a slim, more petite frame, right? We didn't ever really see a silhouette of Superman, so I'm not going to speak on that. But we had an awareness of these different images, these different shadows, and these each one of these shadows was so distinctive that it created a persona. It created something that we were aware of. And so I was watching this video, and this gentleman was talking about how you can play with these different types of silhouettes. But I realized as you develop and as you grow, you want to have a silhouette that is going to be accommodating and that's going to make you look your best. And a lot of guys don't really pay attention to these silhouettes. So I see short guys who are wearing fuller cuts, especially as we're moving back into that other side of the fashion paradigm, even on the sartorial side, right? We're moving back to that. That a lot of these more petite guys, I hate to say it like that, you're not a bad thing, right? You're just a smaller dude, are wearing fuller cut pants and they're overly compensating for the fashion trend instead of paying attention to what is good for their own size and their own scale. And it was just like previously, a lot of thinner guys or fuller guys were wearing a lot of skinny pieces. So there were plenty of times dudes were squeezing into different jeans or slacks because they thought it made them look slim when we all know that you look like you got a sausage, you're sliding into a sausage, pause, right? Or some of my bigger guys who are rounder in the chest and in the midsection would throw on skinnier pants, tapered severely at the bottom, and they don't realize that they are looking like a balloon on a string. I'm exaggerating here, but like, or a lollipop on, on the peg, right, on a stick. And so it threw off the look that they wanted to actually convey when they were putting together their ensembles, right? So it's important for you to understand those elements: your size, your scale, and then the silhouette that's going to create. And then from there, it's important for you to understand the after we talked about the consciousness, to understand the spaces that you're going to find yourself in. So when I'm working with my clients, one of the first things that we talk about is the industry that they're in, their pastimes that they enjoy doing, and how they can leverage these things over and over again, how they can get a utility out of their look, out of their pieces. And so a lot of people, especially fellas, aren't thinking about the spaces that they are going. We talk ad nauseum with clients about the fact that we are creatures of habit. We're going to go to the same space, order the same thing, wear often wear the same thing, talk to the same type of young lady for single, right, or hang out with the same guys if we are not, or if we're not looking, right. It's just going to be a persistent representation of what it is that we do. We find ourselves in the same spaces. And so in those recognitions, there's power because you can say, all right, if I'm typically going to a sports bar, right? If I'm typically more inclined to go to a art experience more so than a party type of experience. There's a different type of look that I can put together. And if I then can compound that with a casual work environment or a business casual work environment, then now I'm able to leverage these things for a better look, right? For a more utilitarian look, for a more uniform look that people can utilize and say, man, like every time I see him, he's on point. So this happened recently with a client who doesn't have to be dressed up. He's still working from home, but he still finds himself out intermingling and socializing, um, sometimes for work and then sometimes just in general. And so he was asking me what he should be getting for the season. And we started really thinking about what it was that he needed. And he was telling me, like, man, I need to come back in and get a suit. I questioned whether or not he needed the suit because he just didn't dress up like that. But he said, I do need a suit. Cool. We ended up grabbing a suit for him for a wedding. This wasn't the suit that he needed, but it was a casual linen wool blend. It was tan, right, for the spring season. He was going overseas to a climate that would accommodate that. And when he got over there, he was like, "Man, this was great. Like, I absolutely love this. This can we get some more?" And I wanted to remind him that like this will work for social spaces, but not in the professional spaces if he ever needs to go in, right? If his job turns into a hybrid position, this is going to still be a little too casual for the type of work that he does. So there is benefit, but there's no utility in the spaces that he is utilizing that piece. Or have you ever been in a space where you got something super dope, like you saw it in the shop, saw it in the store, and you copied, you go get it, and then when you get home, it sits in your closet? Have you ever done it? Like just let something that you were super excited about just sit in your closet. A lot of times when you're doing that, what I recognized is that you don't have the space in your closet to wear that item. You don't have the space in your closet, and you also don't have the space to go to that will help you leverage that item. It's not that it's too loud. It's not that it's too bold. It's not that it is too avant-garde or any of those things. That's BS. I had a guy who had this beautiful lime green two-button sport coat from Ralph Lauren, and he would only wear it like once every 2 months. And I remember thinking like that's the stupidest thing in the world. He wasn't stupid, but I thought that was stupid. Was because I was like, you should be wearing this like 20 different ways. Like, and I started going through like, man, I would pair that with these jeans that you have. I would pair that with these great sets of cream twill plant pants that you have. I would pair this with a white cotton pant. I would pair like I had all these different pairings, and he was like, Michael, like I can't wear this. That's too loud. And this guy was working for Ralph Lauren. He was in the Ralph Lauren shop. I was like, what a better way? What better way for you to put the offering of the brand on display and show how many beautiful ways that this could be presented. And I started to really realize very early on, even stylish guys, if they don't have the space in their mind that they can wear this item, then it's not going to be a benefit to them. This is why a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients, one of the first things that we talk about is four places that they could wear it. And if they don't know where they could wear it, then we can go through how we can put those things together. Once they see that, then they know that they can present that on an ongoing basis. So it's very important for you to think about the spaces that you're going to find yourself in and the identity that's going to come with that. So first we had to talk about your image that was broken down. Then we're talking about your identity, and your identity is tied to the spaces that you find yourself in, and then also to your industry. Now, a lot of guys don't think about this, but if you are in a certain industry, there's going to be a certain level of presentation and an expectation for presentation than other spaces, right? And the space before I get to industry that you also want to think about is your climate, your regional climate, or your social climate. So right now here in Georgia, it's 50 degrees. It was 70 degrees last week. And we always hate around this time and around like October, November, because the city gets bipolar. The weather doesn't know what it wants to do. It's going to be 70 tomorrow and then be 30, on Friday. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be, but it feels like that's what happens. Versus when I lived in New York, when it was cold, it was cold. I didn't have to really worry about it getting above a certain temperature. In Texas, when I lived there, when it was hot, it was hot. I didn't really have to worry about it dropping below a certain level. But if you live in San Francisco, right, or you live in LA or on the West Coast, opposed to going out to LA, then you have to be aware of the spaces that you're in. We went to Muscle Beach one time in LA, and I was chilling in very casual clothes, short sleeve. I think I had some shorts on, and I remember we were there at like 2, but I ended up being there till about 7:38. We had dinner there, and I remember by 5:36 when the sun went down, I was freezing, and it was because the temperature can swing anywhere between 30, I believe, and 40 degrees on the West Coast. So it's important to understand those spaces that you're going to be in for your identifiers. And then it's also important to think about the industry that you're in. So I've had two lawyers come into my offering and that have worked with me. First lawyer primarily handled mediation. The second lawyer was a trial lawyer. Do you think they dressed the same? Or do you think that they had two different expectations? Right? One guy was going to be in court maybe 2% of his career, not of the year, but of his career. He was in court at that space of 2%. The trial lawyer was in court anywhere between um, 80 to 90% of the time, right? And that's not to mention if you're a real estate lawyer or you're a tax attorney or you are a criminal defense attorney. All of these different industries or all these different positions are in the same industry, but they're going to have different dynamics and different needs when they're in there. So when I'm talking to my trial attorney, he was a defense attorney, and he was like, listen, I need to look even killed. I need to look non threatening to my client, and I need to look unassuming to the judge and to staff members. I can't be the guy who's super slick. And so we had to make sure that we were very intentional about creating understated looks that still created a certain level of presence and trust, right? When I talked to the mediation lawyer, he just wanted to seem approachable and kind of even keeled. So we would leverage a lot of grays that he was wearing, sport coats, very soft tailoring, and it always allowed him to seem like he's middle of the road, relatively friendly, but still authoritative and assertive in what his needs were. And if you're a tax attorney, you may have a totally different need than a corporate attorney who needs to look slick, serious, and to a certain degree a little slick, so that they understand that you know where you are and how to move within those spaces. You guys watch Suits. So you want to think about the industry that you're in and then also those subcategories of the industry. If you're in tech, you don't need to be dressed up. And in fact, it probably could be detrimental to your overall presentation if you're overly formal in those tech areas. And if you're in IT, right, then you may be under a desk if you guys are going back to the office, or you may be having to run to different sites for servers or any of these different types of things that may require you getting a little dusty or you a little dirty, right? So it doesn't make sense for you to be in softly tailored clothing frequently when they could get damaged or dirty. Like that doesn't make sense, right? We have a client that we work with who happens to be a farmer. He's a sartorial farmer, is what I like to call him. But he enjoys dressing for the love of clothing. But in reality, he's in his farm clothes 70 to 80% of the time, right? And he is on his tractor going through different fabrics and stuff that he can wear. Now, can he still throw on a sport coat or a hacking jacket or any of those different types of things? Of course. But would he? No, it doesn't really make any sense. And so having an understanding of these different types of industries allows you to figure out what type of foundational capsule you need to have in order to really build your wardrobe. Now, once you have that understanding, right, then now you can start moving into the interactions that you're having. And this is the last spot. It's going to be a relatively quick live today. And if you guys have any questions or any feedback, by all means, leave your comments in the comment box. Again, this is a conversation, not a lecture, unless you let me talk. And then I'll talk. I always got something for you. So in that space, when you start to think about your interactions, this changes how you start to put looks together, right? So I want you to think about three interactions that you may be having. If you're a single guy, you're potentially dating, you're or having initial dates. We'll say first dates, dating, and then in a relationship. From a social space, let's say you are kicking it with the homies, you are just out on the town for the evening, and you are out at a network, right? I'm not going to remember all these, so don't hold it against me, right? But we'll have the overarching conversation. And then lastly, you may be going on a trip. You're going to a new space, right? So you're going to relax, you're going to recharge, and then you're going to explore, right? So if we're thinking about that first element of where you are, the chapter that you are in your life, and let's say that you're in the dating phase. Well, It's important for you to have an awareness of the interactions that you're going to have because you want to think about the quality of those interactions that you want to have. There's something to be said about a guy who doesn't mind being cheap, not frugal, but doesn't mind being cheap. Now, when I first started dating, I remember I was in New York, and this was probably about 10 years ago when a date could run you 150 bucks, like a first date. And I remember telling a young lady, like I had this rule that on the first date I wasn't going to spend more than $25. Don't judge me. And I remember this young lady, she listened and she judged, and she was like you're a cheapskate. And I was like, no. I said, you need to understand if I go out on 5 dates for a week, like I just went out on a date every night, that is what? It's 300, 600, 750, 750 that I'm spending on a weekly basis. That is way more than my paycheck at that was make more than my paycheck at the time. So I was like, I can't afford that. I can't afford to make this investment if a young lady is not interested. And she was like, well, you shouldn't be dating. And I was like, F that. Like, even if I had the money, I wouldn't want to waste that on a fruitless experience for somebody I didn't particularly like. And so the quality of the experiences that I had didn't require a lot of money. So I had this practice, we'll call it a practice, of going to the modern Museum of Modern Art, right? So MoMA. And MoMA on Fridays in the springtime had free Fridays that you could take touring. So I bring a young lady there. They frequently had new exhibits, or if I was a first date, everybody was having a new experience, and I was having a new experience with them, a first time experience with them, even if I had seen the art before. And the space was so big that there were so many different elements for you to explore. From there, I could walk to Central Park. We could have a drink, or we could have like ice cream or something like that. And it ran me about 25, 30 bucks, right? Sometimes I went a little bit over. And that's when I knew, like, yo, if we spent 2 hours together and we've enjoyed each other's time in company, then this is an investment worth making. And I would like to continue the interaction. But you better damn well believe that when I had a first date, I would wear the same thing over and over again, especially once I knew what worked for me and for what we were going to do. I always had a plan for how I wanted to progress the evening, right? And so if you're in this space, people act as if, like, if you go to the same restaurant here in Atlanta, I had a go-to restaurant called Intermezzo's. I could have dessert, you could have like soup salad and an entree for like $70, right? So it was a great first sit down space that we would go to. And then if we were having our first date and we weren't going out, we'd have tea. I had a beautiful space that you could go have tea, but it ran me $20, right? It allowed for me to have a good conversation. And I wore these same items over and over again. I knew what we were going to do, how we were going to get down, and I knew it wasn't going to be so interactive that I needed at leisure or I needed to switch up my look. And that consistency created a certain level of comfort when I was having discourse or a conversation with a young lady, right? And I was already confident, which made her feel more comfortable and it allowed us to connect more. And even though we may not have worked out, I never really had a bad experience to my knowledge. They never said that there was a bad experience when we would interact. It would just be like, we just didn't really click. But once I met my wife, as me and my wife were dating, what I started to pay attention to was, oh, this is how I like to show up. This is how I like to interact with her. I like my looks to be elevated. I like my intention to be clear that I'm not a regular dude. I'm not your average dude. I'm going to set myself apart. Also, with how I interacted with her, opening doors, catering to her, not necessarily financially, but mentally and experientially, right? And that became a space of elevation for her. She then wanted to elevate her image with me because she knew that she was a reflection of me. My wife is in fitness, so if we ever step out, you see her and she looks fit, like she's in fitness, is because she just probably came from the class or whatever. But for the most part, she knows how to put that on when she needs to put it on, and she looks amazing when she does. And so I think about those interactions now, especially as a partner of hers. I need to make sure that I am being the best representation for her as well, because we are a package. We are a dual presentation. So if you're in those different chapters of your life, if you're in that first dating phase and you really haven't found somebody that you want to be with yet, recycle your looks, recycle that confidence, recycle that comfort once you have it, because it'll help you show up in a more dynamic light. If you are dating somebody, then now it's just about you creating that ongoing consistency that will allow you to interact on a level that shows her essentially who you are and what you're all about. And then if you're in that long term space, remember that you are a representation of your partner. I had a client who initially was like, "Oh, I don't really care about how I look." Like, man, I got my wife, and his wife was beautiful. But he was a little frumpy, right? And I remember him saying, like, "I don't really care," until somebody made mention of something that triggered him, and I don't remember what the statement was, but he said, "Yeah, dudes is always coming up and trying to get at my lady, like while I'm there, like I could be basically right next to her, and dudes is trying to step to it." And I was like, "Well, when you look like you don't give a shit, others don't give a shit either, and so they're gonna make a approach. They're going to interact with her because they think you don't care about how you present yourself with your partner. So why should they care if she has a partner, right?" And so it changed the dynamic when he just made a little effort. It took us a while to get there, but he made a little bit of an effort, and he started to see the respect that he commanded with his partner, right? So you want to think about these interactions that you are having on the romantic side. When it comes to the social side, when you're thinking about being out with your boys, that old adage of birds of a feather flock together is very, very true. When I was young, I remember hanging out with some knuckleheads, great dudes, great fathers now, great husbands. When we were young, they were knuckleheads. And they didn't really care about their personal appearance. And I remember going to talk to a young lady at a social event, and also talking to some friends that I went to high school because we had just graduated. And they were like, "Yo, why do you hang out with them?" I was like, "Man, those are my people. I got love for them." And they were like, "But y'all don't even look right together, right? Like y'all don't even look like y'all belong. It's one of these things does not belong." And it was always me. And it was because I had a different presence. And even though I would laugh with a lot of stuff that they would do, they were on some jackass stuff before jackass was really a thing. Um, and I would always be around, but I never really engaged in that because it was silly to me, right? Outside of one thing, which I want to talk about here, right? But I started to realize the importance of your affiliations, who you were kicking it with, who I was interacting with. And while these guys remained my friends, I started to make sure that I had balance in the types of networks that I was interacting with. And I'm not telling you you got to leave your homies alone or any of those different types of things, but we're grown and we do realize that at certain points, your presentation is a reflection of your maturity or your inability to grow up, right? If you're only still wearing J's and that's it, you don't got no loafers, you don't have anything else that you can dress up, then there's a limitation to the access that can be provided for you because you literally can't get in, right? And I'm not just talking about to a an event. I'm talking about to restaurants or to different experiences that don't allow sneakers, right? And guys will always make the argument like, "Yo, but these sneakers cost $1,000. It doesn't matter. It's still a sneaker, right?" And I had a client who was a lawyer. She was a lawyer, and she needed her husband to start dressing well because she was actually suing a restaurant for discrimination because he had on Jordans and was trying to enter into the restaurant, but they wouldn't let him in. This dude happened to be 6'6", black guy, but she quickly recognized, she was like, "We're probably going to win this lawsuit. We're going to settle out of court, right? But my husband needs something that he can elevate or that he can dress up, something that looks dressed up. Because while there may have been some racial bias here, there was a different interaction that he was presenting in that space than everybody else in that environment. And so as we get older, especially when I'm talking to my younger guys, guys who are in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, they have to start realizing that there is a legacy, there's a reputation that comes with their personal presentation, right? It's that first impression that you don't get to get a second first impression on. And so when they start thinking about these things, they start thinking about the spaces that they like to hang out in, they start realizing, oh, it doesn't have to be suited, it doesn't have to be overly dressed up, but there is an intention that can be here. So a lot of guys right now are starting to get into the shirt jacket type of look, right? They're seeing the benefit that can come, sorry about that, that can come from casual elegance, casual sophistication, casual elevation. You know why I'm saying casual? It's, I was saying that differently. Casual elevation in that space, and you never know who you may meet in these different types of interactions. So I was a avid cigar smoker for about 3 or 4 years, and I remember going to a Davidoff spot, dressed up, dressed nice. Now everybody else is in there in track pants, on was it on running, on sneakers, t-shirt, just very casual. But these guys are in their 50s, 60s. Some of them are just leaving the golf course, like they're retired, and they're making some money. But there was one guy in there who was like, "Man, I always appreciate how well put together you are when you come in here." And because of that, he took a liking to me, and he was going to be a mentor. Unfortunately, he met untimely demise, and he was like, that presentation was a great invitation for me to take an interest in to interact with you in a way that would have opened the door for mentorship or for networks within that space. And so you just never know who you may be socializing with and what access they can give you if you're consistent. If you've seen The Pursuit of Happiness, you know that like there's that one scene with Will Smith where he's running late and he has to go get the job interview. He's like, yo, I don't have any choice but to show up in a members only jacket, a white beater under there with paint all over him, and jeans because he was painting his apartment. And he gets the job because the owner, one, he's very, very witty, but the owners ask his one of his employees, have you seen him dressed like this? He said, every time I've seen him, he's always been in a suit and tie. So those social interactions or those professional interactions create a reputation for how people are going to perceive you and what those interactions are going to be, right? And even if you're going on vacation, in my last video, I was talking about 10 mistakes that even stylish guys make. I made one of these was you don't think about the potential memory that you are going to elicit or create when you step out. So me and my wife went to Costa Rica for our honeymoon. Beautiful space. Very, very laid back, very community oriented. It's not really a space that you need to be overly stylish, right? It's not St. Bart's. It's not uh, Tulum, right? It is a just relaxed, chill space. And we were in a small town, beach city. And I remember not really having a lot of beach or casual attire. So my wife did me a favor. She went and grabbed some shorts, and then I had some t-shirts. And I didn't really have any time to have anything made because I didn't really think about it until it was time to, we were a week out before we were leaving. And while we had a great time, and honestly, I wore t-shirts. Don't, I don't think any of you guys will really ever see any of those pictures. All right, but t-shirts and shorts. I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I didn't want to take any pictures. I didn't really want to present myself because it felt not only off brand, but it felt inauthentic. Like, since I've been doing this for the last decade and a half, I've always been well dressed. And so it felt off for me to be so casual, for me to be in a t-shirt and shorts. And so I remember talking to my homeboy. He was like, "Well, what would you have worn?" I was like, "Man, I would have loved to worn like some two-piece sets, like a nice linen set that had a great short and a casual top that could have been intermixed with other different types of looks, right? And I had these silk linen trousers that I converted into shorts. I just had gotten too big, right? I just needed to slim down, so I couldn't wear those. But that would have been great as well. And so the memories are also a part of these interactions. It's kind of like if you do need to lose weight and you start thinking about taking pictures, or there's just some physical thing that you're working on or that you are a little self-conscious about, it limits your ability to create those same memories, to create those same feelings when you are out. That's not to me, that doesn't mean that you won't enjoy them. Me and my wife have plenty of pictures that we're sharing, and I'm smiling and enjoying reviewing those, but it's not something that I want to share with the community around me, right? Versus when people go on their honeymoons, they oftentimes come back with some cool pictures and things of that nature that they can show to others, right? So you want to think about those interactions, and you'll find, interestingly enough, that these things will all cross over to other opportunities. If you're wearing one of these items to the beach, you can probably wear it to the swimming pool or to a cookout, right? If you're not getting in the pool, if you're just hanging around at a pool party, most of the time folks don't get into the pool at a pool party, right? Or if you're just hanging out and you want to be ultra casual but still elevated, you can still throw these things on as well. Or if you want to be colorful and elevated, you can still throw those things on as well. So if you can really start thinking about your your image, right, and that comes down to your scale, your size, and your silhouette, you start thinking about the identity, right, that comes from your industry that you're in, but also from the spaces and places that you're going to find yourself in. And you start thinking about the interactions that you're going to have, whether they're romantic, social, or transitional for vacations or otherwise. Well, now you're really starting to cultivate the necessary elements for you to create a dynamic wardrobe. And you'll find, if you pay attention to those three things, that you don't have to buy a lot in order to say a lot without saying a word, right? And that's what style is ultimately about. It is that thousand words that happen without you ever having to open your mouth. So I want you to really try this on this weekend, to think about those three elements of your style, how you're utilizing it, and whether or not you are taking full advantage of each of those spaces. Because as I've continued to tell my clients, when you can actually see yourself in these different spaces with your scale, silhouette, and size, right? And you think about the interactions that you have in your industry and socially, romantically, or just leisurely. Well, now you really have something that you can utilize, and you don't have to spend nearly as much money, time, or headaches trying to figure out what works for you, because you know that you can easily transition any one of those tailored pieces into a given situation or circumstance that will benefit you. And if you can do that, you're always going to show up and show out in style. So once you try this on, see how it fits you. And if it fits you well, share this with somebody else. You know what I'm saying? They may be trying to develop their look and they want to look better, and you could help them with that, right? Especially if they're in your crew, especially if you need to make sure that birds of a feather flock together and that they look on point. That is the best way to do that. Outside of that, I don't see any comments today, so that either means you guys were listening or had no rebuttals. But be great today and enjoy the different elements of your style, those different parts, because those different pieces and parts of Your unique makeup is what's going to create a unique image and a unique signature style that other people will admire and appreciate. And there's almost nothing more dope than that. So I want you to be great today. If you need help developing your personal style or figuring out what your signature style is, I am getting ready to take one-on-one style sessions. Right, the first 10 are going to be free. They're going to be complimentary. And so if you're interested, you can hit me up. They're going to be for an hour on info at Style Architects. And this will be for the next 30 days. And I'm only taking 10 slots, right? But you can sign up at info at stylearchitects.com and we will schedule time for you to build. And if not, yo, just keep sticking around. Like, I'm gonna help you develop your style. Stay tuned for the upcoming videos that will be dropping at the end of this week, where you're gonna potentially get two videos. You're gonna get one about understanding the most overlooked, but one of the most important elements of your style. And then we'll also be talking about the five things, five shapes that every guy should be paying attention to when they're cultivating their style. So we're back on point, we're back on it, and we will be presenting that at some point at the end of this week. So stay tuned. If you're not following me on YouTube, it's currently Style Architects, a dressing room, and make sure you hit that notification bell. For everybody else who was on all of my live streams, I appreciate you. If you're watching this replay, I appreciate you. And outside of that, be great today. But then again, you already are. So now all you have to do is show up and show out in style, remembering that dress is nothing more than the expression of a man's state of mind. So you, yes, you should always dress to address your life and your style. All right. See you next week. Peace.